This is the Biz News Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
Edgar, our readers will get a short biography about you when they click on our website, but for those who are just watching or listening, they won't. So would you please give them a brief summary of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks again for having me. I'm currently the director of Workplace Fairness, exec director of Workplace Fairness, which is a nonprofit based in DC. What we do is we help people in the public understand their workers' rights laws around the country. So we cover about 400 pages of rights content that goes over all employment laws in the United States and DC. And prior to joining Workplace Fairness, I practiced employment law for 9 years, mainly representing workers and also helping to solve all types of workplace disputes. That's my background in a nutshell.
It sounds like quite an accomplished career that you've had. What brought you around to this type of work, though? For so many managers, when we get into workplace regulations and state laws and federal regulations, we're ready to tear what's left of our hair out.
Yeah, I've always had a natural curiosity to workplace issues. When I was younger, when I thought about what type of career I wanted to have as a professional, I always imagined it being in some sort of role dealing with workplace disputes. And so going to law school really opened up my eyes to the many different pathways that one could take. And that really helped me lock into what I wanted to do long term, with the flexibility that life throws you certain curveballs or opens you up to different opportunities, and you take those. But I would say that the constant has been my my belief in that resolving workplace disputes is where I want to be. And whether that is as a practicing attorney or as a nonprofit leader, that's what I like to operate in.
Workplace disputes, sometimes they're just mild arguments, and sometimes they're far, far worse than that. What advice do you have for managers to throttle them down and to recognize when they might be going down the wrong and awful road?
Great question. I would say that the number one thing is understanding what you can and cannot do. I think that's always the foundation for any type of decision making when thinking about how to resolve a workplace issue. What can and cannot not do. That's the most important thing. And once you have a better understanding as to what your parameters are, that will help you think through how you apply your handbook, which everyone should have. Even if you have one employee, you should have one, and making sure that it's compliant in the places you do business. But I always say, first know what the law is in the places you do business. Make sure your handbook is in line with that, and your policies in line with how you like to make HR decisions and run your business. And then once you have all of that, consult those things. Don't just have a handbook and never use it. Right, that's a good way to get yourself in more trouble or cause more issues than you have to. So understand what you can and cannot do. Have a understanding of your policies and understanding of how you decision in the past, and make sure that you can apply the decision to a specific situation fairly. That's really an important thing.
A lot of our viewers and listeners over the years have been wannabe entrepreneurs, getting ready to start up, and so they're kind of looking for good examples and things they don't want to do. So where do you go buy one of these handy employee handbooks? Probably not at Barnes and Noble, I would think.
No, not at Barnes and Noble, and definitely this day and age, I would highly recommend that you don't just use AI to create a handbook for you. Handbooks, I like to say, are very personal to every organization, even ones that are short or simple, or even the big ones, right? That can go on for 80 pages. They're very unique to every organization. And I'm of the belief that it's important to put together a handbook with care, and use it and create the time and spend the money that you need to create a handbook that speaks to your organization, that addresses all the different things that might come up because of your business or industry that you're in, or how you like to make decisions, and that you're also putting in a process where that it's always being reviewed and updated, because particularly if you're in places that are very employee friendly, employment laws are being updated all the time, and you want to make sure that you're staying abreast of those changes. And the way I see handbooks is that I like to create them with the idea that when someone joins your organization, this is one of the first documents they're going to read that speak to your organization, in terms of how welcoming you are. Do you give them all the information they need so that they can get acclimated to your workplace? Do they understand who they need to go to when they have problems? Can they consult this document, if they want simple questions answered? And the best handbooks tend to indicate that more likely than not, you're in a healthy workplace culture. And so that's why I believe that it's important to have a good handbook, and that you give it the time and attention that it deserves, because it's one of the best ways for you to highlight to someone during your organization that, hey, you made the right decision. This handbook basically gives you the keys to success, as an employee with us, and also indicates to you, the new employee, how organized we are and how considerate we are of the work experience.
Probably as a startup, the entrepreneur himself or herself will write a rough draft and then toss it over to the attorney to make sure that you have everything in there that you need for that particular state. And
Yeah.
you mentioned that, and that kind of brings up a question of where you think employment law is going in this country, because we have 50 states and I don't know how
Yeah.
many territories, and they probably all have completely different worker regulations and laws. Certainly, California's got one point, and
Right.
Florida has another.
Right. Yeah. So that's a very good question. I would say that given where we are with the current climate in the United States, I'm of the belief that more states are going to pass their own laws to um, either dictate what happens with the employee-employer relationship in their state, or try to impact other states. For example, when California tends to pass a law, it's just sometimes for employers based in California. Sometimes it might apply to you even if you're outside California, particularly if you have staff in California, or might do business with California. Just sometimes having a website might open you up to different laws, just because if you're looking to hire remote staff, you might need to follow the laws of certain states because you don't want to be caught in a situation where you're out of compliance. So, and that typically happens, for example, with salary transparency laws. A lot of them require that you have a salary range on your job postings, or that you reveal certain salary information in your job announcements. And so even if you don't really in your mind think you're going to hire someone in California or Colorado, which have some of the stronger salary transparency laws, you still might be subject to them, if you don't follow the laws. So what I am seeing is that a lot more states are getting more in the habit of passing employment laws to counter what's happening or not happening at the federal level, given our current climate. And what you're also seeing is that even in places that tend to be more employer friendly, you are seeing that a lot more groups are starting referendums to get things on ballots. That's how you're having in states that tend to be employer friendly, that minimum wages are rising because they get on the ballot, and those types of uh, uh, questions on ballots are very popular because everyone wants, of course, more money in their pockets, or more paid time off, or other workplace protections. And so those are starting to get a lot more traction. Now, I would say that in some instances, though, like even if something is voted in the law by referendum, state legislatures are now starting to roll them back a little bit. So you're starting to see that. But I do see that in the next couple of years that states will be the essentially the labs for different types of employment laws being passed as bills and being signed by governors in each state.
Here's kind of a question you probably haven't been asked. Which is
Mhm.
better for the employee, a strong union or a strong HR department?
I would say both. I think uh, I'm a big believer in organized labor and that people should have the ability, in a workplace to come together, whether you call it a union or something else, but the idea that you come together as a group, to uh, actively uh, discuss or push back against workplace issues that you don't feel are fair, or that are not helpful to retaining the best people at that work site. I'm a big believer in that, and a lot of people when they hear of workers come together automatically think union, which is the case, for many workplaces, but there are places where they don't necessarily call themselves a union, but an organization of workers that band together to protest or fight against workplace conditions that they don't believe are fair, or right. And even if you're not push a union, federal law still protects you from engaging in that type of activity, what we call concerted activity under the National Labor Relations Act. So my standing recommendation to any workers is that if you're going to protest against workplace conditions that you don't believe are fair or unsafe or unjust, that if you can do it as a group because you have more protection from retaliation, or other types of uses. Um, I also believe that a strong HR department is essential in any workplace. The HR department is the place where people are looking for a redress. And I think HR has a very unique role in the success of any organization. I often tell people that, HR is not a profit center. HR is not making money as an organization. However, it does ensure that cost mistakes don't happen. Because those mistakes, eat at your bottom line. And so HR plays an integral role in your cost development, in your ability to make decisions without making costly mistakes that might impact your bottom line. I'll even say that HR is important to maintain a healthy work environment where people feel welcomed and feel that their work is valued, that if they have a complaint about something, that it's addressed right away. Because I find that, a key indicator of a lagging organization is their ability to keep their people engaged and working and make profitability or success of an organization, and not having disputes or interpersonal conflicts that are a drag on the work environment. Because we've all been in work environments where when you have those types of conflicts, it impacts successful outcomes. Which for an organization is, are we making money? Are we carrying out our mission? Are we being responsive to our client customers? That's the end game, and you want those HR issues to impact that. And that's why I think a strong HR department is so important.
And unfortunately, so many small businesses never get to the volume of income that they can afford a real HR department, so that those
Right.
duties kind of fall on the shoulders of I don't know, somebody.
Right, right.
Here's a quick question: which do you get more calls and inquiries from, employees or employers? Hers.
Yeah, so workplace fairness, I would say that a large majority of our content and the people who visit our website daily are workers. I mean, yeah, all workers. And and I would say that on average we get north of 1 to 2,000 visits on our website. And sometimes more depending on the time of year or what's happening, or what's happening in the news. But I always say, like, we're open to the public, right? And um, so I imagine that we do get from time to time employers that might find our site and are looking for information, to help them better understand what they cannot do. Just going back to our first, question, and my first response, and we're always open to helping people navigate workplace issues. Like I would never turn away an employer that says we have a question about something, if it's in service of, how do we make sure we're doing the right thing? How are we making sure that we are making decisions that are not going to cause someone being undignified at work because we made a poor decision or we handled something poorly in the way we carried out an HR decision. And so I think it's important. I'm a big believer in that. Better to have information before you and make the right decisions, even if they're a tough one, than to operate in ignorance and make the wrong decision that might have ripple effects beyond just that you made this bad decision. A lot of times lawsuits don't necessarily happen because there's actual a legal issue that was, or a statute or a law that was violated. That happens a lot, and so the lawsuits do happen. But a lot of times it's because of hurt feelings, and someone wanted to be dressed, and sometimes it was a simple thing that gotten done, and it didn't get there, and so they feel no other recourse but to file a lawsuit, and so you know, I I take no position on whether that's right or wrong, but it's just an act of the matter, and so always implore employers to always think about that. Think about the ripple effects that these decisions might have because it could come to a lawsuit, even if you don't think um, it has merit. And also, this day and age, we're all now on social media. Even if you don't have an account, you know, um, we social media is such a big part of our lives, and and always remind employers that if you make a poor decision, particularly with a certain demographic of the workforce, they're not afraid to go on social media and talk about it. And it used to be that it would, if you suffered a workplace indignity, yeah, maybe you file a lawsuit. You used to just eat it. You say, all right, I'll just go on and find another job and hope I can get past it. Not more. People will go on TikTok or Twitter, or going to the local news, station, and they felt that they were discriminated against or treated unfairly or whatever it is. It's not a foregone conclusion these days that it can be reputational risk if you are not making the right decisions per where we're doing business or what's right. And so it used to be that maybe if you're a bigger company, that's something you have to deal with, but not anymore. I mean, even your local business might face reputational issues if they're going to be bad employers. So I really believe it's important that everyone, once you make that big decision as a business to hire your first employee, that you really take that seriously, you know, um, because you are impacting that person's ability to live and put the table, take care of the family. People belong to communities, so you are in some ways helping certain communities because you're empowering that person to make a check. And so if you impact that in this type of way, in a way that's unfair, it might come back to you these days. So
A couple of more questions. One is very
Yeah.
important. What is your website? Please spell it out for us.
Yes. Our website is www.workplacefairness.org. Uh, and yeah, and that's, yeah. So if you look at my background, basically that word, one word.org.
All one word. And speaking of words, what would you like to add that I haven't been bright enough to ask you?
Yeah, good question. I The one thing I'll add is that in terms of our website, we do a very great job of making sure that it's accurate at all times. We have a system of making sure that even for content that maybe is not as widely searched because it may not be something that impacts as many workers, we still make time to make sure it's updated. And we also have specialty pages for different demographics of workers. So we have pretty good content for federal workers, which really came into play in the past year or so. We also have content for people who are currently incarcerated or coming out of incarceration. So that way they're able to start navigating the job market, given the particular set of circumstances they have to deal with and trying to show that they are capable of taking on employment. So we try to cater to different aspects of work. But of course, our core content that covers all 50 states is the constant. And we try to make sure that it's updated. And our staff does a tremendous job of doing that.
You've been listening to the Biz News Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@biznews.com. That's BIZGNUS.com. Thanks for listening.